When my ex-husband's lawyer called me just another unstable military wife, my family laughed, and my mother filmed it for humiliation. But when the judge said, "Counselor, she's Rachel Martinez, our state attorney general," the courtroom went silent. That's when I knew this wasn't about divorce. It was about showing a family who'd tried to destroy me exactly who I'd become. When my ex-husband's lawyer called me just another unstable military wife, my family laughed and my mother filmed it for humiliation. But when the judge said, "Counselor, she's Rachel Martinez, our state attorney general." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The courtroom went silent. That's when I knew this wasn't about divorce. It was about showing a family who'd tried to destroy me exactly who I'd become. My name is Rachel Martinez, and I learned early that in my family being strong was considered a threat. I was 8 when my father first told me that girls who talked back would never find husbands. I was 12 when my mother said military service was for women who couldn't handle being feminine. By 15, I'd stopped sharing my dreams of law school because every ambition was met with eye rolls and lectures about knowing my place. But something inside me refused to shrink. Maybe it was watching my older sister Maria collapse under their constant criticism, abandoning her nursing degree to become what they called a proper wife. Maybe it was seeing my cousin Elena get pregnant at 17 because she believed their lies that education was pointless for women. Whatever it was, I knew I had to get out. At 17, I walked into the Army recruitment office in downtown Phoenix against every family rule. My father called me selfish. My mother cried about losing her baby girl to war. My grandmother crossed herself and said I was bringing shame to our bloodline. They acted like I was choosing death over family, but to me, I was choosing life over slow suffocation. Basic training at Fort Benning was brutal, but it was honest brutality. Drill sergeants yelled at everyone equally. Success was measured by performance, not by how quietly you accepted criticism. For the first time in my life, being tough wasn't a character flaw. It was an asset. I thrived in that environment where strength was rewarded instead of punished. During my 3 tours in Afghanistan as a military police officer, I saw real hardship. I watched villages torn apart by war, families separated by violence, children who had nothing but still smiled. It gave me perspective on what actual problems looked like. My family's constant criticism seemed petty compared to soldiers writing their last letters home, or local women risking their lives to educate their daughters. I used my GI Bill to attend Arizona State University for my bachelor's degree, then Georgetown Law on a full scholarship. Every semester I sent my grades home, straight A's, Dean's List, law review. My family's response was always the same: when are you going to settle down and start a real life? I met my ex-husband David during my first year as a prosecutor. He seemed different initially, supportive of my career, proud of my military service. He'd introduce me as Rachel, the veteran lawyer at parties. But after we married, the mask slipped. Suddenly my long hours were selfish. My ambition was unfeminine. My success made him look bad. Breaking point came when I was offered the position of state attorney general. Instead of celebrating, David demanded I turn it down. "No wife of mine is going to have a bigger job than me," he said. When I refused, he filed for divorce, claiming I was an absent, career-obsessed wife who'd abandoned her duties as a woman. What I didn't expect was how quickly my family sided with him. They called me stubborn, selfish, too proud for my own good. My mother actually apologized to David at family dinner, saying she'd failed to raise me properly. They treated my divorce like a public humiliation, proof that strong women always end up alone. But as I sat in that courtroom listening to them laugh at what they thought was my downfall, I realized something powerful. They'd spent my entire life trying to convince me I was broken for being ambitious, damaged for being strong, wrong for wanting more. Now I was about to show them exactly how wrong they'd been about me all along. The first time I truly understood my family's system of control, I was 26, and had just been promoted to senior prosecutor. I'd driven home to Phoenix for my cousin Miguel's wedding, expecting to share my good news. Instead, I walked into what felt like an intervention. My Aunt Carmen pulled me aside at the reception and said, "Mija, you need to stop making the other women in this family look bad. Your success makes their husbands question why their wives aren't achieving more." My mother nodded in agreement, adding, "Maybe it's time you focused on being a better wife instead of chasing these career fantasies." I stared at them, realizing this wasn't about my individual choices anymore. This was about maintaining a family hierarchy where women stayed small so men could feel big. My success threatened their entire worldview, and they were circling the wagons to protect it. David began weaponizing my family against me. He'd call my mother after every argument, painting himself as the long-suffering husband of an impossible woman. "Rachel works until midnight again," he'd complain. "She missed another family dinner for some case. I don't know how much more of this I can take." My mother would then call me with lectures about priorities. "A woman's first job is her family, Rachel. Your father never had to wonder where his next meal was coming from or whether I'd be home to take care of him." She spoke like my career was a hobby I was selfishly indulging in, rather than the culmination of years of education and military service. The manipulation became more sophisticated over time. Family gatherings turned into group therapy sessions where everyone shared their concerns about my marriage. My sister Maria, who'd given up her nursing career, would say things like, "I just worry Rachel doesn't understand what real love requires." My cousin Elena, now trapped in her third pregnancy, would add, "Some women aren't built for both career and family." They made David out to be a saint for putting up with me. At my nephew's baptism, my uncle Roberto actually toasted David for his patience with such a difficult woman. The room erupted in laughter while I sat there, feeling like I was watching my character assassination in real time. But the system extended beyond my immediate family. David had allies throughout our social circle, other husbands who felt threatened by successful wives, other wives who'd been taught that supporting ambitious women made them bad women. When I'd attend military veteran events, some of the other military wives would whisper about how I was one of those career women who think she's better than everyone else. The breaking point came during a family barbecue when I announced my nomination for state attorney general. Instead of congratulations, the backyard went silent. Then my father spoke up. "Rachel, this is getting embarrassing. You're 32 years old, married, and still playing soldier girl and lawyer games. When are you going to grow up and have children like a normal woman?" David seized the moment. "I've been trying to talk sense into her for months. She thinks being attorney general is more important than being a mother. What kind of woman chooses power over family?" The nods around the circle told me everything I needed to know. That night, I lay in bed understanding the full scope of what I was facing. This wasn't just David being unsupportive, or my family being traditional. This was a coordinated effort to shame me back into compliance, to convince me that my strength was actually weakness, that my achievements were actually failures. They weren't just trying to control my marriage. They were trying to control my entire identity. And for the first time, I realized I was going to have to choose between the family I was born into and the woman I'd fought to become. The night I accepted the state attorney general position, I found David in our bedroom, packing my clothes into garbage bags. His face was calm, almost satisfied, as he folded my military dress uniform and shoved it into black plastic like it was trash. "What are you doing?" I asked, though part of me already knew. "What I should have done years ago," he said without looking up. "You made your choice, Rachel. You chose that job over our marriage. So now you can live with that choice somewhere else." I stood in the doorway watching him discard 8 years of our life together. When he picked up my Bronze Star medal and tossed it carelessly into a bag, something inside me snapped. "That medal represents 3 tours in Afghanistan, David. It represents serving my country while you were playing video games in college." He finally looked at me, and what I saw in his eyes was pure hatred. "Your country, your career, your precious reputation. Everything matters more to you than being a wife. You're not a woman, Rachel. You're just a man in a dress pretending to be something you're not." That phrase echoed in my head for weeks. A man in a dress. It was exactly what my family had always implied but never said directly. That strength in women was unnatural. That ambition was masculine. That I was somehow defective for wanting more than their narrow definition of femininity. The divorce proceedings started immediately. David's lawyer, James Morrison, no relation to the judge, was a shark who specialized in high-profile divorces. His strategy became clear during our first mediation session. Portray me as an absent, career-obsessed wife who'd abandoned her marital duties. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Mrs. Martinez works 70-hour weeks, Morrison told the mediator. She missed anniversaries, birthdays, holidays. She chose her job over her husband repeatedly. My client simply wants what any reasonable man would want, a wife who prioritizes family. What hurt more than David's betrayal was watching my family rally to support his narrative. My mother testified in his deposition that I'd always been difficult and stubborn. My sister Maria submitted a written statement about how I'd changed since joining the military, becoming cold and distant from family values. Even my cousin Elena, who I'd helped through her own abusive marriage, turned against me. She told anyone who'd listen that I'd gotten too big for my britches and that David was a saint for putting up with my selfishness for so long. The breaking point came during a family dinner 3 months into the divorce proceedings. I'd arrived late from work, still in my prosecutor's suit, exhausted from a complex murder trial. Instead of concern or support, I was met with a coordinated attack. "Look at her," my Aunt Carmen said, gesturing at my appearance. "Dressed like a man. Acting like she's better than all of us. This is what happens when women forget their place." My father nodded approvingly. "David's a good man. He deserves better than someone who thinks a law degree makes her special." But it was my mother's words that broke something fundamental inside me. "You know what, Rachel? Maybe David's right. Maybe you're not cut out to be a wife. Maybe some women are just meant to be alone." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed what she'd just said. My own mother had essentially told me I was unlovable because I was successful. That my strength made me defective, my achievements made me unwomanly, my service to my country made me unworthy of love. I looked around that table at faces I'd known my entire life. People who were supposed to love and support me unconditionally. Instead, I saw a jury that had already convicted me of the crime of being ambitious while female. That night, I realized I wasn't just fighting for my divorce settlement. I was fighting for my right to exist as myself without apology. The first time I truly understood what I was up against, I was sitting in my lawyer's office listening to him explain why my case was going to be difficult. Michael Chen was one of the best divorce attorneys in Arizona, but even he seemed concerned about the narrative David's team was building. "They're painting you as the stereotypical career woman who neglected her marriage," he said, shuffling through depositions. "Your family's statements are particularly damaging. It's unusual for a wife's own relatives to testify so strongly against her character." That's when I realized I needed to start thinking like a prosecutor instead of a defendant. I had spent years building cases against criminals who thought they were untouchable. Now I needed to build a case for my own life. I started documenting everything. Every family gathering where they criticized my career, every conversation where David undermined my achievements, every instance where they tried to make me feel guilty for my success. I kept a detailed journal, noting dates, witnesses, and exact quotes whenever possible. The evidence was everywhere once I started looking for it. Text messages from my mother saying things like, "Rachel, your husband called again. He's really struggling with your selfishness. Maybe you should consider couples therapy to learn how to be more supportive." Voice messages from my sister. "I don't understand why you can't just be happy with what you have. David loves you, but you keep pushing him away with this career obsession." I began recording family phone calls with an app on my phone. Arizona is a one-party consent state, so it was perfectly legal. The conversations were even worse when they thought no one was documenting them. My father telling my uncle, "Rachel thinks she's some kind of war hero, but she's just a woman who forgot her place." My Aunt Carmen laughing, "She'll learn eventually." Career women always end up bitter and alone, but the most damaging evidence came from an unexpected source: David's own behavior. He'd been so confident in his righteousness that he'd documented his own manipulation. I found emails he'd sent to my family members, coordinating their statements for his divorce case. One message to my mother read, "I need you to emphasize how Rachel's military service changed her personality. Make it sound like she came back damaged and unable to connect emotionally." Another email to my sister was even more calculated. Focus on specific examples of her choosing work over family. The more emotional you can make it sound, the better. We need the judge to see her as cold and career-obsessed. The smoking gun came when I discovered David had been secretly recording our arguments for months. But instead of capturing evidence of my supposed instability, the recordings revealed his systematic emotional abuse. Hours of him calling me selfish, unnatural, and defective. Audio of him threatening to, quote, destroy my reputation if I didn't learn to be a proper wife. I also found communications between David and his lawyer that revealed their strategy went far beyond the divorce. They planned to damage my professional reputation, suggesting to colleagues that my personal instability made me unfit for public office. Morrison had even drafted a letter to the governor questioning my emotional fitness for the attorney general position. The most chilling discovery was a group chat between David, my father, and my uncle Roberto titled, Rachel Intervention. Messages revealed they'd been planning this coordinated attack for months, timing the divorce to coincide with my nomination to maximize public humiliation. One message from my father read, "Sometimes you have to destroy someone to save them from themselves." But gathering evidence was only half the battle. I needed allies, people who could testify to my actual character, instead of the distorted version my family had created. I reached out to my military commanding officers, my colleagues at the prosecutor's office, and my law school professors. Their statements painted a completely different picture: a dedicated public servant, a respected colleague, a woman of integrity and strength. The truth was more powerful than their lies, but I'd have to fight to make sure it was heard. The moment Judge Morrison called for a recess after that devastating testimony, I knew I had to make a choice. I could either let their narrative destroy me, or I could fight back with everything I had. As my family celebrated in the hallway, taking selfies and talking about going to lunch to celebrate justice, I slipped away to the courthouse bathroom and called my lawyer. "Michael, I need you to file an emergency motion for judicial recusal," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Judge Morrison's son is David's attorney. This is a conflict of interest that should disqualify him from presiding over this case. Michael was quiet for a moment. "Rachel, that's a nuclear option. It'll make enemies of the entire Morrison family. Are you sure you want to do this?" "They're already trying to destroy my career," I replied. "I'd rather go down fighting than let them win through corruption." 2 hours later, we were back in court with emergency motions that changed everything. Michael presented evidence of the family connection between the judge and David's lawyer, requesting immediate recusal and reassignment of the case. The motion also included my evidence of David's manipulation, the recordings of our arguments, and the emails showing coordination between him and my family. Judge Morrison's face went red as Michael read the motion aloud. "This is highly irregular," he protested. "The court finds no conflict of interest in this matter." That's when I stood up and did something that shocked everyone in that courtroom, including myself. "Your Honor, with respect, I'm exercising my right to represent myself in these proceedings. I'm also filing formal complaints with the State Bar regarding the attempted manipulation of this court." The gallery erupted. My mother shouted, "Rachel, sit down! You're embarrassing yourself." My father yelled something about disrespecting the court, but I remained standing, looking directly at Judge Morrison. "Your Honor, I'm a prosecutor with 12 years of experience. I know judicial misconduct when I see it. This case is being reassigned whether you recuse yourself or whether I take this evidence to the state Supreme Court." Within an hour, the case was reassigned to Judge Patricia Williams, a no-nonsense federal judge who'd recently been appointed to handle overflow family court cases. The difference was immediate and startling. Judge Williams reviewed all the evidence I'd gathered, the recordings, the emails, the documentation of emotional abuse. She also examined the suspicious timing of the divorce filing and the coordinated family testimony. Her first ruling was to seal the proceedings and clear the gallery of non-essential personnel. "This court will not be a venue for public humiliation," Judge Williams announced. "We're here to determine facts, not to provide entertainment." My family was forced to leave the courtroom. As they filed out, I could hear my mother shouting about activist judges and my father muttering about the system being rigged against good men. For the first time in months, I could breathe freely. Judge Williams listened to my evidence with the attention it deserved. She reviewed David's recorded threats, his emails coordinating with my family, and his lawyer's attempts to damage my professional reputation. She also heard testimony from my military colleagues and professional references, people who knew the real me, not the distorted version my family had created. The contrast was stark. Where my family painted me as cold and unnatural, my commanding officers described me as dedicated and principled. Where David claimed I was emotionally unstable, my colleagues testified about my professionalism and integrity under pressure. When Judge Williams announced that she was ordering a comprehensive review of all evidence and postponing any final ruling until after the holidays, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: hope. Walking out of that courthouse, I realized I wasn't the same woman who'd walked in that morning. I'd found my voice again, my strength, my refusal to be diminished by people who were threatened by my success. The attacks began 48 hours after Judge Williams took over my case. It started with a fake psychiatric evaluation that mysteriously appeared in my state attorney general nomination file. The document, supposedly from a military psychologist I'd never met, claimed I suffered from chronic PTSD with aggressive tendencies and was unfit for positions requiring sound judgment. When I called the governor's office to dispute it, his chief of staff sounded uncomfortable. "Rachel, we're getting calls from concerned citizens about your mental health. People are saying you had a breakdown in court, that you're under investigation for professional misconduct. We need to pause your confirmation hearing until this gets resolved." The concerned citizens were my own family members, systematically calling every professional contact I'd ever made. My mother had somehow obtained my work phone directory and was calling my colleagues at the prosecutor's office, claiming I was having a mental health crisis and needed professional intervention. My sister Maria went further, contacting my law school alumni network with emails describing my erratic behavior and dangerous instability. She even reached out to my former commanding officers, claiming the family was worried about Rachel's psychological state and asking if they'd noticed signs of mental illness during my service. The most damaging attack came through social media. Someone had created fake Facebook accounts using family photos and began posting detailed stories about my supposed mental breakdown. The posts were crafted carefully, mixing just enough truth with lies to seem credible. One post read, "Heartbroken watching my sister Rachel's public meltdown. Military service changed her, and now she's attacking everyone who tries to help her, praying she gets the help she needs before she hurts someone." It was shared hundreds of times within the first day. David escalated his campaign by hiring a private investigator to follow me. The man was obvious about it, parking outside my apartment, sitting in coffee shops where I met with clients, even following me to the grocery store. When I confronted him, he smiled and said, "Just documenting behavior patterns for the court, ma'am." But the psychological warfare went deeper. My apartment building's management received anonymous complaints about my violent outbursts and threats against neighbors. My gym membership was suspended after someone called claiming I'd made aggressive comments about wanting to hurt people. Even my veterinarian's office called to express concern about my pet's welfare based on reports of my instability. The professional sabotage was systematic and devastating. Opposing attorneys in my active cases began filing motions questioning my competency. One defense lawyer submitted a formal complaint to the state bar, claiming I'd made threats and irrational statements during plea negotiations, conversations that had been completely professional but were now being reframed through the lens of my supposed mental illness. My own prosecutor's office began distancing themselves from me. Cases were quietly reassigned, meetings were rescheduled without me, and colleagues who'd been friendly for years suddenly avoided eye contact in the hallways. The whisper campaign was working exactly as designed. Mari Viatita. The breaking point came when I discovered David and his lawyer had been feeding information to local news reporters. Channel 7 ran a segment titled "Domestic Troubles for Attorney General Nominee" that featured interviews with my family members expressing deep concern about my fitness for office. My uncle Roberto appeared on camera saying, "We love Rachel, but military service damaged her psychologically. She's become violent and unpredictable. Arizona deserves better leadership." My cousin Elena added, "She threatened her own husband during their marriage. What would she do to people who disagree with her policies?" The story featured carefully edited footage of me leaving the courthouse looking stressed and disheveled, played alongside ominous music and commentary about the, quote, concerning pattern of behavior my family had observed. That night, I received a call from my military mentor, Colonel Sarah Parks, who'd seen the news coverage. Rachel, what the hell is happening? These people are claiming you're dangerous. I know you. This isn't who you are. They're trying to destroy my reputation, I told her. They're using every professional relationship I have as a weapon against me. Then it's time to fight back, she said. But we need to be smarter than they are. Colonel Parks didn't just offer moral support, she brought resources. Within 48 hours, she'd connected me with Lieutenant Colonel James Rodriguez, a military attorney who specialized in defamation cases involving veterans. He took one look at my evidence and immediately understood the scope of what we were facing. This isn't just family drama, Rodriguez said, spreading the documents across his conference table. This is a coordinated campaign of character assassination using military service as a weapon. We're dealing with people who understand exactly how to manipulate public perception of female veterans. Rodriguez brought in Dr. Amanda Foster, a forensic psychologist who specialized in evaluating claims of military-related mental health issues. Dr. Foster's analysis of the fake psychiatric evaluation was devastating for David's case. She identified multiple red flags: terminology that was outdated by military standards, diagnostic criteria that had been misapplied, and references to treatment facilities that didn't exist. Whoever created this document has knowledge of psychological terminology, but lacks understanding of actual military mental health protocols, Dr. Foster explained. This appears to be constructed by someone with access to psychiatric textbooks, but no real clinical experience. The breakthrough came when Rodriguez hired a digital forensics expert to trace the fake social media accounts. Within a week, we had IP addresses, device information, and a paper trail that led directly back to my family members and David's legal team. The most damning evidence came from my Uncle Roberto's computer. The digital forensics revealed he'd been the primary author of the fake psychiatric evaluation, using templates he'd downloaded from questionable online sources. Email records showed he'd been coordinating with David and James Morrison to create what they called documentary evidence of Rachel's instability. But the investigation revealed something even more disturbing. This wasn't the first time they'd done this. We found evidence of similar campaigns against other women in their social circle who'd challenged traditional gender roles. My cousin Sophia, who'd divorced her husband 2 years earlier to pursue a medical degree, had been subjected to the same whisper campaign about mental instability. Dr. Foster's comprehensive psychological evaluation of me was completed in January. The results were unequivocal. No evidence of PTSD, no signs of psychological instability, and strong indications of someone who'd been subjected to systematic emotional abuse and gaslighting. Ms. Martinez shows classic signs of being a target of coordinated psychological manipulation, Dr. Foster wrote in her report. Her responses are consistent with someone who has been systematically undermined by family members and intimate partners over an extended period. The investigation expanded when we discovered that James Morrison had been using his law practice to coordinate similar attacks on other successful women during their divorce proceedings. A pattern emerged of wives being portrayed as mentally unstable when they refused to accept unfavorable settlement terms. Rodriguez filed complaints with the state bar against both Morrison attorneys, citing evidence of professional misconduct, fabrication of evidence, and coordination with clients to commit fraud. He also filed federal civil rights violations, arguing that the systematic targeting of my military service constituted discrimination against veterans. The governor's office quietly reopened my confirmation hearing after receiving our evidence. The fake psychiatric evaluation was removed from my file, and they began their own investigation into how fraudulent documents had been inserted into official state records. Local news stations that had run the defamatory stories were presented with our evidence and forced to issue retractions. Channel 7 ran a follow-up segment titled Family Fraud: When Personal Vendettas Become Public Lies, that exposed the coordination between my family and David's legal team. Most importantly, other victims began coming forward. Women who'd been targeted by similar campaigns reached out through Rodriguez's office, creating a network of evidence that demonstrated this was part of a larger pattern of abuse disguised as legitimate legal strategy. "You're not just fighting for yourself anymore," Rodriguez told me as we prepared for the final court hearing. "You're fighting for every woman who's been told she's crazy for being strong." The final hearing was scheduled for February 14th, Valentine's Day. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the packed courtroom. But this time, the gallery was filled with a different audience. My military colleagues, fellow prosecutors, veteran advocacy groups, and other women who'd survived similar attacks. The media was there too, but now they were covering the real story, a story of corruption and coordinated harassment disguised as family concern. Judge Williams had spent weeks reviewing all the evidence Rodriguez had compiled. The fake psychiatric evaluation, the coordinated social media campaign, the evidence of professional misconduct, the digital forensics reports, everything was laid out in a comprehensive filing that painted a clear picture of systematic fraud and defamation spanning months of calculated attacks. David's legal team looked visibly uncomfortable as they entered the courtroom. James Morrison's usual swagger was completely gone, replaced by the nervous energy of someone who knew he was about to be professionally destroyed. His backup attorney kept checking his phone, likely fielding calls from other clients who were distancing themselves from the scandal. My family sat in the back rows, no longer the confident accusers they'd been in December, but quiet observers who seemed to understand the tables had turned completely. Judge Williams opened the proceedings with a statement that sent shockwaves through the courtroom. "Before we address the divorce petition, this court must address evidence of fraudulent documents, witness tampering, professional misconduct, and civil rights violations that have corrupted these proceedings and attacked the integrity of our judicial system." She called James Morrison to answer for the fake psychiatric evaluation first. Under oath, he claimed he'd received the document from a, quote, concerned family member and hadn't thought to verify its authenticity. When Rodriguez presented the digital forensics evidence showing the document had been created on my Uncle Roberto's computer using downloaded templates, Morrison's entire defense crumbled before our eyes. "Mr. Morrison," Judge Williams said sternly, "presenting fabricated medical evidence to this court constitutes fraud, perjury, and professional misconduct of the highest order. Your law license is hereby suspended immediately pending a full state bar investigation. You are also being referred to the district attorney's office for criminal charges." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. David's backup attorney tried desperately to distance himself from Morrison's actions, but Judge Williams cut him off. "Counselor, your client's coordination with these fraudulent activities makes him equally culpable. When my Uncle Roberto was called to testify about creating the fake evaluation, he broke down completely under the pressure." Rodriguez's cross-examination was methodical and devastating. Under oath, Roberto admitted to the entire conspiracy, revealing details that shocked even me. "David said Rachel needed to be stopped before she embarrassed the whole family," Roberto testified, his voice shaking. "He said successful women like her make other men look weak, and that she was setting a dangerous example for the younger women in our family. He wanted to destroy her reputation so completely that no other woman would dare follow her path." My mother's testimony was equally devastating to their case. When confronted with recorded evidence of her calls to my professional contacts, she tried to justify her actions. "We were trying to save her from herself. Women like Rachel, who put career before family, always end up miserable and alone. We thought if we could just show everyone how unstable she'd become, she'd realize she needed to come home and be a proper wife." Judge Williams interrupted her sharply. "Mrs. Martinez, attempting to sabotage your daughter's professional relationships, creating false narratives about her mental health, and coordinating attacks on her reputation because you disagree with her life choices is not love. It's systematic harassment and abuse." The most powerful moment came when David took the stand. Rodriguez methodically went through every piece of evidence. The recorded arguments where David threatened to destroy my reputation, his coordination with my family to fabricate testimony, his hiring of private investigators to stalk and intimidate me, and his attempts to have me declared mentally unfit for public office. "Mr. Henderson," Rodriguez asked, "did you or did you not tell Mrs. Martinez that you would, quote, destroy her career if she didn't learn to be a proper wife?" David's answer was barely audible. "Yes." "And did you coordinate with her family members to create false narratives about her mental health and professional competency?" "Yes." Did you attempt to interfere with her nomination for state attorney general through fraudulent means? Yes. Was this divorce ever about irreconcilable differences, or was it about punishing Mrs. Martinez for her professional success and independence? David looked at his attorney, then at my family, then back at Rodriguez. His voice was hollow when he finally answered, "I wanted her to choose me over her career. When she wouldn't, I wanted to make sure she paid for that choice. I wanted to make an example of her so other women would know what happens when they think they can be more successful than their husbands." Judge Williams's final ruling was swift, decisive, and comprehensive. The divorce was granted with extreme prejudice against David. He was ordered to pay substantial damages for defamation, harassment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Criminal referrals were made to the district attorney's office for fraud and conspiracy charges against David, James Morrison, and my uncle Roberto. Most importantly, she issued permanent restraining orders preventing David and my entire family from any contact with me or my professional associates. She also ordered the creation of a formal record documenting their harassment campaign to prevent them from targeting other women in the future. This court finds that Mrs. Martinez has been subjected to a coordinated campaign of harassment, defamation, and fraud, designed specifically to punish her for her professional achievements in military service. Judge Williams stated, "Such behavior represents not just personal vindictiveness, but an attack on the fundamental principle that women have the right to pursue their careers without facing systematic destruction of their reputations by those who feel threatened by their success." As I walked out of that courtroom, vindicated and free, surrounded by supporters who believed in my truth, I realized this wasn't just the end of my marriage. It was the beginning of my real life as a woman who would never again apologize for her strength. 3 months after the trial, I stood in the governor's office taking the oath as Arizona's first female state attorney general. The ceremony was broadcast live, and I couldn't help but smile knowing that somewhere, my family was watching the woman they'd tried to destroy reach the highest legal office in the state. The confirmation hearing had been unanimous after the fraud scandal broke. Several senators publicly apologized for initially questioning my fitness for office based on fabricated evidence. Senator Martinez, no relation, said during the hearing, "Ms. Martinez's handling of the systematic attack on her character demonstrates exactly the kind of integrity and resilience we need in our Attorney General." My first case as AG was prosecuting a network of divorce attorneys who'd been using fabricated psychiatric evaluations to manipulate family court proceedings. James Morrison and 2 other lawyers were ultimately convicted of fraud, conspiracy, and professional misconduct. Their tactics had been used against dozens of women over the years, successful businesswomen, military veterans, and professionals who dared to challenge unfavorable divorce settlements. David pled guilty to conspiracy and harassment charges in exchange for a reduced sentence. During his sentencing hearing, he finally showed genuine remorse. "I destroyed my marriage and nearly destroyed an exceptional woman because I couldn't handle being married to someone more successful than me," he told the judge. "Rachel Martinez deserved better than what I gave her, and Arizona is lucky to have her." My uncle Roberto served 6 months in county jail for fraud and document forgery. My family's reaction to his conviction was telling. They blamed me for tearing the family apart, rather than holding him accountable for his crimes. It was the final confirmation that cutting ties with them had been the right choice. The case attracted national attention and led to significant reforms in family court procedures. The Martinez Protocol now requires verification of all psychological evaluations and creates clear penalties for attorneys who present fabricated evidence. Several states have adopted similar protections for divorce defendants. Colonel Parks nominated me for the Veterans Administration's Distinguished Service Award for my advocacy work with female veterans facing similar harassment. The citation read, "For exceptional courage in exposing systematic discrimination against military women and creating lasting protections for veterans in civilian legal proceedings. I established the Clear Voice Foundation using the settlement money from my defamation case. The organization provides legal support for women facing coordinated harassment campaigns during divorce proceedings. We've helped over 200 women in our first year, many of them military veterans whose service was being weaponized against them by abusive ex-husbands. Our most successful case involved Captain Maria Santos, whose ex-husband had hired the same private investigator who'd stalked me. Using the precedent from my case, we not only secured her divorce but also criminal charges against her ex-husband for harassment and intimidation. Maria now works as our foundation's military liaison, helping other veteran women navigate similar situations. The foundation also created educational materials for family court judges about recognizing coordinated harassment campaigns. Dr. Foster developed training protocols that help legal professionals identify fabricated psychiatric evaluations and systematic defamation tactics. These materials are now used in judicial training programs across 12 states. Last month, I received a letter that surprised me. It was from my cousin Elena, who'd testified against me during the original divorce proceedings. She wrote about finally leaving her abusive marriage and pursuing the nursing degree she'd abandoned 15 years earlier. "Watching you fight for yourself gave me permission to fight for myself," she wrote. "I'm sorry it took me so long to understand that your strength wasn't a threat to me. It was a gift showing me what was possible." On the 2-year anniversary of my divorce trial, Judge Williams invited me to speak at a judicial conference about recognizing domestic abuse disguised as family concern. As I stood before a room of judges and attorneys, I reflected on how far I'd traveled from that courtroom where my own family had tried to destroy me. "The most insidious form of abuse," I told them, "is when those who claim to love you most coordinate to convince the world, and convince you that your strength is actually weakness, that your success is actually failure, and that fighting for yourself is actually selfishness." I've learned that breaking free from toxic family systems isn't about winning. It's about refusing to shrink yourself to make others comfortable. It's about choosing your authentic self over their distorted version of who you should be. Sometimes the family that matters most isn't the one you're born into, but the one you choose. The colleagues who believe in you, the mentors who guide you, and the people whose support isn't conditional on your compliance. My name is Rachel Martinez. I'm Arizona's State Attorney General, a veteran and a survivor, and I'm exactly who I was meant to be. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.